Ladies.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Should we get started or no?
No, that's
No, I'm just kidding. You guys okay to get started? I know we're like are we the last thing between us and lunch? Okay. We're gonna have to like tap dance, but we're gonna be so much fun that it'll be okay. We'll give you guys who are standing like 30 seconds, but then you're gonna, hopefully this will be awesome and it'll be great. This discussion really is about entrepreneurship. And raise your hand if you're in this audience before I even introduce it. Like if you are an entrepreneur or married to an entrepreneur, have a kid who's an entrepreneur. Okay, raise your hand if you work in the private sector, and raise your hand if you're in the public sector. Okay, got 2 hands. Okay, someone's working twice. For those of you I don't know, I'm Jenny Abramson. And I am the founder and managing partner of a fund called Rethink Impact. And we invest mostly in private sector companies trying to make lots of money. We come in usually when they have between $500,000 and $20 million in annual recurring revenue. And we're trying to scale them to $100 million, $200 million in revenue. We've backed companies in the health space, education, the environment, fintech for good. Basically things that we think are huge business opportunities but happen to close gaps. So that's, and always tech businesses, so no physical inventory. We have over about $500 million that we invest, all US focused, so nothing against other countries, we just know less. And my background is I started as an entrepreneur, sort of become venture capitalist, went to nerdy schools, but also did work in the public sector, both in the education space, worked in government, worked in the nonprofit, but mostly have been in the private sector. So I'm thrilled to be here today, and much more exciting than me are our 2 panelists who are here. I'm technically supposed to introduce you, I think, because people worry that intros get really long and boring. But I'm gonna trust you guys to do the like 30-second version. This isn't the what your company is. This is just the who you are and like the four words on what your company is. So Diana, I'm gonna give that challenge to you first.
Oh no. Hi everyone, I'm Diana Heldfond, founder and CEO.
Can you guys hear Diana?
Can you hear me?
No.
Okay.
Better?
Good practice.
Okay.
Diana Heldfond, CEO and founder of a company called Parallel Learning. You want me to start with my own background or
just do
company?
like the 1 sentence on Parallel. We'll get into what it is more.
Okay.
Just like it's in this space.
And you want my personal background
Yeah, your
also?
personal
Okay.
background.
I thought you were
the short version of it.
Okay,
You know.
okay. Parallel, we work with public school districts across the United States to help them solve gaps in their special education departments. So both from a staffing and also a software perspective, helping that unique population of complex learners exceed expectations and overcome challenges. My background, I'll start with very personal side of things, is that I am very dyslexic myself and have ADHD. So very natural progression to starting a company in this space. Prior to starting Parallel, I worked on Wall Street doing investment banking, M&A and restructuring advisory. And prior to that, I actually started another education company here in DC when I was in college here. So
go ahead.
Hello, I'm Shelly Lanning. I'm a co-founder and president at Visana Health, and we are a women's medical clinic, virtual women's medical clinic. But I've spent my entire career in healthcare in a combination of venture capital investing and then also as an owner and operator, and always in healthcare, but the last 6 years has been in a variety of women's health, so fetal maternal medicine, fertility, obesity management, and now Visana, which is doing all things women's health outside of family building.
Very well done. Okay, you guys have a sense of who we are? Okay, because we're gonna make this more interactive, not just because it's before lunch. So get ready to ask the things you actually want to know. We're gonna start with asking a few questions, but then I won't cold call. At Harvard Business School, we did cold call people, I guess. I won't do that, but I will do a little of calling on you, so hopefully you'll have great questions. So Diana, you talked briefly about why you started Parallel. is there anything you want to share about you originally sold to direct to families, direct to consumers, and now you sell through school districts? What prompted that change?
Yeah, it is a great question. So just for a little bit of background for everyone, so we do everything from psychological assessments all the way through to ongoing services, things like specialized instruction or tutoring for kids who have a learning disability, things like speech and language therapy, so on. So everything from kind of diagnosis on through remediation. As you can imagine, a lot of those services are being delivered in public school districts, but a lot of them are also procured by families just outside of school district. And frankly, a lot of those families have the means to go outside and around the school district because school districts are largely inefficient. But with that, we saw an opportunity ultimately to do both. And so early on in the company's journey, we were actually starting to sell direct to consumer, directly to these families. Keep in mind, our company started in 2020, right when the pandemic was also in full swing. And so virtual options were a necessity, not just a kind of interesting opportunity. And a lot of these families weren't able to get any services through the school districts. And so at that point, having a direct care option was amazing for people. Obviously, things then kind of started to get better and went back down to normal. Special ed is still an area that's never normal and always has some element of staffing constraints and challenges. And that was really what gave rise then to what we now consider our B2B part of the business, which is selling directly to K-12 school districts. I would say this was a big kind of challenge for us at one point, trying to allocate resources to two fairly different businesses, especially as they continued to scale. Turning off ultimately a revenue driving part of the business is very, very challenging. Probably one of the hardest things I've had to deal with as a founder. But at the same time, it became clear that the B2B part of the business was frankly taking off in really exciting ways, that we were being able to do so much good and serve so many students while at the same time generating a lot of revenue for the business. So in February 2023, we actually pivoted the whole company to focus exclusively on K-12 school districts.
And I'll say in the name of full disclosure, we invested in this company.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it to 200 million for you.
Exactly, so really important. For us, when we looked at the investment, while the direct-to-consumer business is really interesting and we had sort of tracked it, for us, we like businesses that close gaps and equity gaps. And sometimes they're great businesses solving really important problems, but the people who can afford them buy them and the people who can't. And so in some ways they widen gaps. And so it was really exciting to us to see the company shift to a focus that was closing gaps. That's not necessarily right for all investors. We also love things that are B2B because you have to be really good at picking taste. Especially on some of the consumer product areas. And so there's a stickiness that comes from B2B contracts. Not a better or worse, but just sharing that as we talk about B2B and B2C. Visana, talk about for Visana, what was you and your co-founder, like, why did you want to start it? Talk more about that story and why it was so needed. Is there a data point that you think is most powerful? Or?
Well, to start off, Visana was started by a man focused on complex gynecology, which is very strange, I will admit. And Joe Connolly's mother, his aunt, his grandmother, all the women in his family suffered greatly from endometriosis, uterine fibroids. And it had such a grave impact on his childhood. They couldn't hold down jobs. They had a difficult time planning family vacations, predictably to know. They had such bad pain, they would go to the hospital often during the year and have vomit every single month during their menstrual cycle. So for him, this was a way of living and a thing. I was looking as an investor. I'd sold a company in 2018 and investing in women's health out of those proceeds. This is my fourth investment in women's health. But as I was looking, I was trying to find something that was where I would back it as an investor. And I thought it was very strange. Once again, there's this guy talking about women's complex conditions. And I told him that. And then he said, why don't you join me? And so I did. So here I am.
That's great.
What was really great is we started off thinking about endometriosis, uterine fibroids, chronic pelvic pain, heavy menstrual bleeding, PCOS. And those were conditions that even though I was a woman who had 2 children, Perimenopausal age, I did not know anything about them. I didn't even believe they were a thing. So I had to spend time knowing if there was a there for this type of business model. So First Money, and we raised to conduct a pilot in collaboration with Optum Labs around those complex conditions and a differentiated care model, looking at using the women's complexity to figure out what are outcomes, what is the business model, evidence-based. We include diet, exercise, nutrition, mental health support, long appointment times, early, late, and very, very outcomes-based to be able to show via case match control claims analysis, 26 million women, that there actually is savings to be had. And it's not just savings for the businesses, but the women themselves as well. And so that was the big driver around wanting to do something that was different in women's health.
Amazing. Well, you talked about raising money. You guys have both raised money. Let's go to the other end, the exit side. How do you think about exit? There's a lot of pressure based on who your investors are. I know you recently raised a round from First Cressy, I think, right? And Flare Capital.
It's almost 2 years ago
2 years ago. I call that recent in whatever. But in dog years, I guess not. But how do you think about the other side, the exit side? What do you guys want as you think about an exit, and how much does that align with your investors, or how do you think about that alignment? I'll let you go first, since we just talked about it.
So managing and balancing the expectation between investors and what the management team is doing can be a miss on occasion. Sometimes what the management team wants to do is to grow and expand, and yet the investors may be looking to raise their next fund and want an exit. So you do have to have alignment. But the fundamental business metrics that are so important is you need to be able to show that there is a real problem. You have to, that your solution solves, and that you can make money. And if you can't solve those things, if you're emotionally driven, it's time for women, we deserve better. It's, why haven't we been focused on, like, those don't, while emotionally they might be true, they do not raise venture capital money, and they do not drive to an exit. So aligning on the core business principles are all critically important.
That's great. What about you, Diana?
I totally agree with all of that. I would say for those of you who are considering either starting businesses and/or thinking about raising capital for your businesses, I think it's really important early on to think about what you personally want for your business. Keep in mind, we both went the venture capital path, and that's a very different path than a lot of other funding mechanisms that are out there. I think it's also super important early on in the fundraising process. Jenny and I spent a lot of time before she ever invested in our business talking about what my expectations were for the business and what I thought exits could look like, both the quote unquote downside scenario that might be not as big and sexy of an exit. And then like what was that big, huge, we're going to IPO as a standalone company. But typically a VC investor is going to want that quote unquote big sexy exit, whether it's a huge acquisition or, you going public as a large company. And like I said earlier on, there are a lot of different paths. And so I think venture capital gets the big attraction, but it's not always necessarily what's best for your type of business. So the other advice I would just give is very early on in the process, spending time with those that are capital providers of different backgrounds and thinking about what's best for your specific business.
If you're not looking to grow 3x year over year all the time, right, by 300%, there are a lot of other great funding paths that don't push you to have certain growth rates that frankly may take up your ownership in ways you don't want. There's great debt options. As Diana said, venture capital gets in the movies and venture capital gets a lot of the glory, but in reality, it's not always the right type of investor for every type of business. And if anyone is interested in other paths of investment money, I'm on LinkedIn. Jenny Abramson, you can link into me. You can always message me on LinkedIn. I know debt providers and other folks, and we'll do my best to follow up. But I think one of the biggest learnings I've had is when we back a company and what they really wanted was just money in that moment, because they just needed money and they wanted whatever money they could get, but the money wasn't totally aligned. that's a really hard place to be. So I just sort of throw that out. Shelly, what is something tangible someone in this room could do for you?
So I really believe that we are on the front side of a really big thing in women's health. People are talking about it now. It's not as stigmatized, but there's such a lack of funding, a lack of knowledge, lack of clinical trial, a lack of everything. Things that we know now that seemed weird to us in 2018 even. Medical schools aren't teaching it, businesses don't know about it, and now it's on the front of a lot of pages. But I would just say, like, we want to be involved, we want to be connected, and so for those of you who are involved in women's health, it can be on a foundation, a nonprofit, it can be for-profit. We would love to hear from you. I'm also LinkedIn Shelly Lanning.
Awesome. Diana, whether it's a business leader in here or someone in government, nonprofit, you are literally right by the White House. You're, by the Hill. You're in from New York. Talk to us about what are the most helpful things that people in this room who either have a child with special needs, so might care about this personally, might have someone in their family who wasn't diagnosed. I mean, many of us have lived this in our own lives, and I feel like this is an issue that has so much great tech, and you've done such an incredible job of Parallel, and yet most of us don't know outside of our personal lives how we can make a difference. What can people here do?
Well, I will start by offering up also. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Diana Heldfond. And if you are going through this personally, navigating any of this with your family, by all means, feel free to reach out. In terms of things that you all could do to help us, without getting into everything going on in the administration and politics right now, obviously education is at the forefront of a lot of conversations. I would say we are in a very unique part of kind of education in that special education is extremely bipartisan. It is not technically super related to the Department of Education without getting into all the nuances, but clearly there's a lot of things changing. And so for any of you who are connected to the world of education, I would say, like, more so than ever before in the history of Parallel, I'm really intrigued by kind of what is going on in policy world, not just as like hey, this would be interesting for 5 years from now as an expansion into one of these areas, but really now being at the forefront of how do we think things are going to change over potentially just the next 3-4 years. And so really anything in this realm of education is super helpful to us here at Parallel. And I also will obviously say any school administrators that anyone knows, we will happily take that introduction.
Okay, I'm going to do something unkosher. I'm going to turn it to you and let you ask a question. Then we'll go back to my questions. Do you have a mic back there, or do I need to, like, play Oprah? I'll do it, but if Natalie can do it.
One thing I'd love to comment on what you're doing
Let me let her ask this question, and then we'll jump right back. What? Oh, okay. I don't want to cut you off, but is there a question? Yes. What's the question? And mostly we're going to do questions through the app, but this one you seem so eager, so let me. Yes. So the thing is, a lot of things are changing. We strongly believe that the Americans with Disabilities Act and the idea that covers the IAPs is fundamentally pro-legislation, where some of the brightest kids are labeled disabled. Yep. Okay. Let me, do you have anything you want to say on it or?
I mean, I second that. Within reason, I'm like, please don't change things too much. Yeah, I mean, it's a complete mess. I am so sorry that that's what your family has gone through. Unfortunately, I hear stories like that all the time, and that's what we're here trying to make things simpler. And also, just to touch on what Shelly mentioned around outcomes that you guys are focused on at Visana, it's certainly something that we're also focused on a lot here at Parallel is how do you actually change the conversation beyond just checking a box that students are, getting the hour served that is in their IEP and part of the legislation, and that's what holds, that's district to being compliant, but rather how do we actually make kids succeed in life to the extent that they're in the best position possible upon graduation to do whatever they set their minds to.
I'd love to just comment on this in that I went through the same process with my own child, and it is hard. I'm in healthcare my entire life. I have great insurance. I really understand the system. I know how to connect it, and I could pay. And it was really hard for me too to navigate, figure it out, and people downright lied all the time about when they could do things. So I just want to say I think it's an amazing service that we all have, and being able to lean in and understand what the school districts have access to would be really important.
So I think the biggest barrier on some of these businesses, like in Diana's case, is a school district just knowing about it. Once they know, they always buy and they always grow their contract. It's just getting to them. And so in some ways, this conversations like this, why Mark DeCourcy and others were so grateful to have this conversation, is the work Shelly and Diana are doing is critical for women. One, moms often are the ones who are experiencing these challenges, who are taking the time. It's not to say there aren't amazing dads doing it. But two, these are huge business opportunities. We're going to jump to some questions online. We have a few others we want to share, but we got in some questions. The first one is, can you share an example of a female entrepreneur who inspires you and why? Which one of you? I'll let one of you take this, and I'll jump to Shelly. I'll let you take this one.
Well, mine is very cliche a little bit, but I think Oprah's pretty amazing. And part of what I like about her is that she is very true to what she believes in. Early on in her career, when they wanted her to have a Jerry Springer type show, very focused on what's negative, a lot of screaming and drama, and she said, no, quit, and then started her own thing, wants to be the epitome of class. So having a belief around how you want behavior in your company, your organization, your mission, critically important.
Great. Diana, I can tell you all can see it makes it a little less exciting when I ask it, but how can communities better support female entrepreneurs? Like what have communities either done that have helped to support you, or people have done, or what can they do to better support women?
I mean, I'll make a quick plug for the community that you've built at Rethink, which I'm certainly not required to do, but it is really the one forum where I am surrounded by other female entrepreneurs. Jenny's fund only invests in female founders for the most part. And so on an annual basis, we've been able to come together and just have a forum to openly talk about the struggles of being female. I think in my day-to-day life, I would say majority of the people aside, I'd say Parallel's actual company is fairly balanced between males and females, but all the investors for the most part that we deal with, so much of just like the tech ecosystem and frankly like healthcare ecosystem and education ecosystem, if I look at other founders, very male centric, right? Just like so many other industries that we are all in. And so I think creating a quote unquote safe space to talk about what it's actually like to be a female founder going through the motions and the differences between the male journey and the female journey, just things like, what is it like to literally raise a family and also have this large company and be responsible, right? It's very rare that you are having those type of conversations with anyone other than, this safe community. So I think it's not a super direct answer to your question. But I guess the more that you can engage in these female-centric communities, there's a lot of these communities, I would say, certainly in New York where I'm based, but I'm sure in every big city, and working with investors who are, specifically focused on females, or kind of creating that community for yourself.
Shelly, I'm going to ask you to answer the same question.
I think you have to have business principles all the way around. And I don't even remember what the first exact question is, but so many women who haven't had the same mentorship. When I was growing up at Morgan Stanley, I was one of 2 women on the entire floor. And we were all thinking about seats at the table and equitable pay, the glass ceiling. Those were the conversations. We never talked about our health, our well-being. We never talked about those things. I had a baby and went down to a bathroom to use the pump, and that was embarrassing to talk about. And now people are talking a lot more. But the bottom line is, emotion does not sell. Emotion does not create. And we, as women, generally speaking, are better at emotion. We're good. It's our superpower. So lean in and do what you need to do the way we're supposed to do it. But if you don't have the solid business fundamentals down, what are we selling? Who is our customer? I need to know the health plans better than the health plans know themselves. I go to the gym, I listen to the recordings. I have to know exactly what, but it's hard to do that. But that's what the guys do too. But if we don't have that, what is our ARPU? What is our average selling? Who are we selling to? What is the metrics? If we don't have those core OKRs and KPIs that we manage to, really hard, because then it's hard to get the investors interested.
You know, there's a question on here, what leadership qualities we look for and sort of the most successful women founders. And I will say, like, we love men, we love women. I'm married to a guy, like, men are great. And men happen to get about 98% of all venture capital dollars. And so for us, we can back anyone we want. We happen to think there are a lot of companies being run by women, and women are awesome. And, but both are great. And we love diversity. We love women who work with men. We think that actually they bring different skill sets, and these are total overgeneralizations to the table. So it's often diversity of race, of gender, of all kinds of diversity just leads to better outcomes. There's a lot of data behind that and a lot of studies. And so what we look for in leadership are people who surround themselves with people who are different from them. And that can be different educational background, it can be different geographic background, but we think that it leads to people questioning each other more, people not doing groupthink, it leads to more innovation. So that's one of the things we look for. We look for people who are deeply passionate, as obviously both these individuals are, about the problem they're solving, because every entrepreneur is going to run into roadblocks, and it's going to be really, really hard. And we want people who are going to keep going because they are dying to solve that problem. You know, we have a company in the mental health space, and the CEO had her own mental health experience. And so at every turn, when it got hard, instead of blaming the world, blaming the market, blaming investors, she was like, I just got to keep doing this, right? It's that sort of personal responsibility for problems you run into and passion for what you're trying to solve that we think allows these entrepreneurs to succeed no matter what. So those are some of the things that we look for.
Can I add one more thing too?
Of course.
You have to ask. You have to ask. Women don't ask. There's a
Ask
book.
what?
Whatever you need to know. I need to be promoted. I need more money. I need to raise money. You need to invest in me. You should be looking at Visana. Those are the core things. Women don't ask. So put your hands up and ask. Go after what those things are, because often, surprisingly, they call you. It's pretty, there's a really good book out there.
So we're going to go into a bunch of these questions. I've seen people taking pictures. We're very honored. I feel like I would have done my hair better. But if you're on LinkedIn, post one of these pictures, tag us. You had our names. They were up here before. And let's make sure, even beyond what questions we get to in the next few minutes, that we keep this conversation going, because I think forums like this, and what's great about being in person, is they can be the beginning of a much longer conversation, and you all are amazing in your own right. So we'll keep going, but Diana, why don't you take this? What's the difference between knowing the pain points and wanting to solve them profitably?
Ooh, that's good. It's a great question. I would say everything that we do, we take the approach of trying to do profitably. That said, look, like, there is an immense amount of need out there for the services that we are delivering. And if I could go hire every single school psychologist at any dollar amount possible, then yeah, Parallel could be massive, and we probably would be less profitable than we are today. And so there is always this push and pull. I think I say, like, capital efficient growth maybe once a day to my team. And certainly in every board meeting. And so it's about finding the balance where you can grow, but grow sustainably. And we really take a very strategic approach to almost every decision being made, whether it's, what price we're going to bring individual contracts in at, what price we're going to offer to each individual provider that we're bringing in. Just to make it very clear, we run like a highly micromanaged marketplace. So there's a lot of decisions that have to be made on a day-to-day basis to make sure that that growth is being sustained in a profitable manner. I think one of the most helpful things for me, I come from a finance background, but building a team of both data experts and finance experts has been really helpful, especially when you get to the scale that we're at. We have about 55 people in the company, and I probably didn't hire the finance person until maybe like the 40th employee. And if I could go back in time, I probably would have hired them earlier.
And we hear that again and again and again in companies.
Yeah.
And
same
finance
with
person early.
Data also, being able to build that infrastructure early on where you actually have data to make good decisions off of, it will allow you to grow in a much more profitable way early on.
Let me ask you guys, we're going to do sort of lightning questions and answers because we have a bunch of questions. Do you have an AI specific person in your company, or is it like a data person where you say, hey, think about how to use AI? Shelly.
Yes, we have a CTO, 3 product people, 12 engineers, and 2 data people. That's all they do, a senior and a junior person.
And is anyone's job just AI specifically?
AI is interwoven. It's like saying food, I guess. For us, it is interwoven into everything we do.
Okay.
And there's JV versions of AI, then there's C Squad, and then there's varsity AI. And you have to build on the JV, the C Squad, and the bench warmers before you see the varsity.
Diana, same question.
We do not have one person devoted to AI. Our VP of product and engineering, Merrill, is like an AI genius, and all he wants to do is be 100% devoted to AI, and I have to bring him back down to reality sometimes.
The JV?
Yeah, exactly. We have a really small team. We have one product person, one senior engineer, and 2 other engineers.
Raise your hand if you use AI in your day-to-day job. Okay, raise your hand if you use it in your personal life. Okay, interesting. Does Visana, Shelly, work internationally? And if not, have you considered moving outside the U.S.? Again, lightning question answer.
We do not go internationally. We only are in the United States primarily because we partner with health plans and self-funded employers. We are not selling direct to consumer. And because of that, our product offering, while it could apply outside, we need to be laser focused on the customers that we're servicing now. We've been in with United Healthcare for over a year. We just signed with Cigna. We just signed with the largest health plan, the Blues, in Massachusetts. So we have to be really focused on knowing the customer that we're going after.
That's great. Were there other options outside of venture capital? We talked a little bit about this before that either of you considered. And if so, which ones? And why did you go the VC path?
I can go. I did not consider any other options, though. In retrospect, I think at the time when we were raising our initial capital, 2020 through like 2022 was like the golden age of digital health, was getting so much venture capital investment that I don't even think I thought twice about it. But there are certainly a lot of businesses. As I look around, I would say, we obviously take a very tech lean, but there are a lot of like companies that got funding early on that probably would have been way better served just raising some debt. So again, this is where I think like at the earliest point, having those conversations with other founders, diversifying your network beyond just like tech VC investors. Not all companies are made equal. Also, if you are looking to like just build a really great business and you want to maintain ownership of it, take out a loan and start business.
Right, because one of the things with venture capital is you give up a lot of the ownership in the company. And so, if you think that's going to allow you to grow the pie in a massive way, it's worth it. But if you think it's going to be a slower growth business, that can be a lot harder because you give up the ownership of what's not getting to be a large pie. Shelly, what about you guys?
Just I'll make one quick comment.
Yeah.
You can make a lot of money, potentially more money, growing it the slow way.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what I would say is that in order to get debt, for the most part, you have to have a profitable company to go in and say, I'd like you to give me $10 million or whatever.
You mean the debt path? Or?
Yeah, the debt path. So whether that's even an option for you is going to depend on your business model, and your reoccurring cash flow. Where you can think differently, which is how we started off, is that we bootstrapped it, threw in our own money, didn't take salaries, worked really long hours, and then raised friends and family, went out and got a little bit from you, a little bit from you, a little bit from you type of thing. And that we put into a debt structure. It was a convertible note. So, but there was nobody on our board, nobody looking at under the covers at what we were doing or how we were doing it. So there wasn't the same distraction factor. And then that note that was converted in when we raised venture capital money, so that we were able to run without anything because none of us took salaries. Then we ran with a little bit of the debt. And then by the time we raised we were able to track really good healthcare investors because we had the data and the technology to demonstrate that there was a there.
Just to clarify, though, you
Yes.
can take out like a small business loan if you want to start if you need help in that bootstrapping fashion. That is not the same as putting.
Typically, though, don't they tie it to somebody secures that note? You use something to secure that
There
loan.
are some, we can put it on LinkedIn. There are some places where you can do it without having profitability and others, but they're small.
Yeah.
And so it just depends
talking
how
very
much
different
capital
amounts of
you
capital.
need.
Okay.
One of the questions that came are sort of other examples of philanthropic and public sector entities that fill private venture capital sort of gaps that private VC leaves and to fund slower growth companies. I will say there are a number of family offices who care deeply about whether it's healthcare, education, other areas, where they sometimes have an investment arm, and sometimes that investment arm doesn't need the kind of returns that venture capital needs, or they might have a philanthropic arm, or both, and you can get money from those pools. There are SBA loans. I don't know what the latest is with the SBA, but in theory, I think they're still there. There are matching programs as well. I don't know if you guys have others.
Lots of grants. It's really difficult to figure out how to do in the healthcare space or the science space, but absolutely well worth it. If you have something that qualifies, I know a company who's raised $21 million on grants, and it's free money. It's free meaning it doesn't dilute your ownership. So hire someone the first time to navigate you through. It'll feel expensive, but it is well worth that return.
Someone asked, how do you balance the outcomes of impact that you want to create with the pressures of growing 3x? And when have they conflicted, and how do you manage that? I will say, at least for the companies we invest in at Rethink Impact, we are looking for what we call convergent business models, where the more impact a company has, the more money it makes, and the more money it makes, the more impact it has, because then people don't have that conflict. So it's not a Tom shoe, buy one, give one away free, where often that conflict gets tough because the investor says, oh, we're not making enough. Do you sure we still want to give one away free? That's not always the case. For each of you, how do you balance when there are trade-offs between impact and growth?
So for us right now, healthcare is really expensive to get it started for what we're doing. We have to be laser focused on our core model, which is the health plans. But within the health plans, we are right now in the fully insured and commercial book of business. Virtual centers of excellence, all 50 states, United Healthcare, drop down. You'll find us. But if you're in Medicaid, or you're in a really high deductible health plan where you pay cash for everything, or you're maybe Medicare, those are different types of contracts with different legal requirements that still fall under that United Healthcare or Cigna umbrella. It can. We have gone very clearly under our own commercial because we have to have scale in order to be able to offer services under lower margin Medicaid, for example. And so it is being focused on getting that scale so that we have the opportunity to have the impact in those other channels.
How long does it take you to close a health plan? For people who are interested in healthcare businesses, like, is it a year? Is it 6 months? Is it 2 years?
Well, it's an annual selling cycle, and it often takes a couple of years to go. We did ours in 6 months with United, ran a pilot for a year, did a case match controlled claims analysis that took about 3 months, signed within a month, launched in 3 months in 6 states, and then all 50 states last April.
So end to end, that was 2 years?
Yeah,
Or 3 years?
18 months.
18 months.
But I don't know that I've seen it be that much faster than that.
That's
So
impressive.
It
No,
is
it's
really,
amazing.
it was faster with Cigna and faster with the other Blues plan. But when you start to have the flywheel moving with real data, it goes back to having real data, real outcomes, real metrics.
This says to Parallel CEO, Diana, and founder, can you share how you made the connection with Jenny, me, to present to me as a venture capitalist? Sorry, it's weird to read about yourself in the third person.
In our case, I think you actually reached out to us, but that was only because we had raised previous capital. So we were certainly on the radar.
That's very exciting.
We were on the radar of other investors, and I will say it certainly is like a flywheel. Getting the first capital in, very difficult. And as you start to make those connections and build those relationships with investors, I mean, even Jenny and I met a long time before she ever actually invested in the business. So I spend probably 20% of my time, it ebbs and flows based off of how actively we're thinking about fundraising. Sometimes 100% of the time, talking to investors and really just building relationships. And so really just being on those investors' radars is really the most important thing when then does come to the point where you need more capital for the business.
And I will say we look at probably 700 companies a year, of which we invest in probably 4. And so a lot of that is inbound. And the biggest mistake people make is not doing research on who you're reaching out to know what they care about. It's pretty easy. It's on their websites. It's in their posts. So really, I'd say if I could give any advice on people reaching out to investors, it's really be targeted in how you do it and really understand what they're looking for. In our case, there are certain areas like the work that these guys are, where we're really interested. So we're tracking every company and we meet them, frankly, to help. Like long before we even thought about investing in what Diana was doing, we were really interested in the space, and we like helping female entrepreneurs and all entrepreneurs who are having a social impact. So we'll often do that along the way. And I think when people do that for you and what you're doing, it usually, hopefully, is a sign they're the kind of people who are going to want to help you down the road. I don't know, Shelly, if that's been your experience.
I'd like to just add that if you're going out to raise venture capital money, you should have a very clear, quick elevator pitch. Know it inside out and backwards. It's crazy how many people do not have that down. What do? It ought to be very clear, very quick. And then number 2, ask. And 3, have the core metrics around why they should care. When you can say, I dropped these 3 contracts, I've got this data, we have annual revenue of this, a back run rate of that, that's what piques people's attention. You have to start with a little bit of FOMO. How do you get them really interested? What brands, what logos, or data right up there. And it needs to be short, quick, sweet, to the point. But so often people write these long emails and it's buried in the text.
Can I just add really quick here too? Because I literally had this conversation yesterday. I thought this was really good advice. Make sure you're also talking, to Jenny's point, the right person and the right firm. For us, for example, there are a lot of ed tech specific funds. There are a lot of healthcare specific funds. Those funds probably are more likely to want to invest in a company like Parallel than like a generalist investor that has the option of like a sexy AI company. And I think Parallel's sexy, but I'm biased.
We think it's very sexy.
And also if you're talking to a big fund that has a lot of different areas that they invest in, making sure that you're talking to the partner there, or that first off, making sure you're talking to somebody senior who actually has the ability to make a decision on your investment, important, and building those relationships, but also making sure you're talking to the right partner there that actually does cover the sector that you operate in. Because in these big funds, a lot of the times you might get connected to somebody, but they're not the right partner, and they're going to say no without actually socializing it very much within the business.
Shelly, very quickly, how have you helped your employees manage and navigate your growth and pain points? Sort of what's the best advice on that for people?
I don't even know if I have a good answer for that because we're changing so rapidly. We've set up a pod structure to we can cross-functionally address really core important things, and every single person that we want in the company to wake up thinking about what those, in this case we have 3 pods, and then some of them are sprints. What are we doing in this pod for this period of time that everyone will wake up thinking about? And that has moved a lot really fast. But the very difficult part is how do you have a collaborative environment when you're not all in person? And that has been a really big, I think that's been a challenge.
I would just say, since we don't have a lot of time left, we will leave the couple questions that we had there and some others that have come in since for the LinkedIn conversation that I'm making up that hopefully someone at the chamber will help us do, with some beautiful picture that we'll have a filter that this one person was taking here. But what I would say is the one piece of advice for entrepreneurship that I will leave with is alignment. Alignment with your employees. I think Shelly so eloquently sort of talked about, like whether it's through pods or through other structures, alignment with investors. You know, like we back Impact, we back whatever, but at the end of the day, it's not our own money, it's other people's money. And so we can't always follow on unless someone's hit their numbers. And if you don't say that to people up front, people have expectations that are off and people are frustrated. If you don't say to your employees, here's what you need to do up front. So really making sure you're aligned, I think, leads to better outcomes. If you guys were going to leave with 5 words of advice for this group, what would be or one sentence advice? What would it be for people who are entrepreneurs or talking to entrepreneurs?
Ask.
Okay, I like that.
Women don't ask.
Diana?
I would probably just say have so much confidence and know that like you're gonna get thrown or knocked down a lot and you're gonna hit another peak like a week later and get used to the ups and downs and don't take the downs as too serious because something good will happen.
The other thing I'd love to add is that my best piece of advice after asking is to find yourself a personal board of directors. Call it 3 people, might be 1, might be 3, who always will have the ability to have the confidence, right? So you can be confidential in your ask, but they will answer the question looking through your eyes. So you might be a lawyer, might be another person who can do a contract, but find those people and then nurture the heck out of those relationships.
And I will just end by saying entrepreneurship, I think, I'm biased, it's just an amazing thing as someone, and obviously all ways of having an impact, but it's an amazing way to have an impact. And in this unusual moment of change, regardless of politics, one thing is for sure, we have a lot of problems to solve, and there are a lot of ways to do it, but I think everybody can get excited about things getting solved in the private sector, at least as one component of how we solve and tackle problems. And so I think this is an exciting moment for Chamber and the foundation to be holding up and for you all to be part of this conversation. So thank you for doing that. Thank you to our panelists. We had Shelly, who spent 11 hours on a runway trying to get here last night. So join me in giving them a huge thanks.